Matt second.
Matt second, oh, sorry, yeah. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion is carried. Okay, we will move to the adoption of minutes of the October 25th meeting.
I move to accept the minutes as presented,
I'll
or
second.
approve, I guess, the minutes.
Moved by Rue, second by Vittery, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion is carried. Okay, we, delegations, are they? All right, there he is, right, as soon as I said delegation, there he is.
A little fogged up here for
You
you.
need.
We have our police reports that we've had, delivered to us, and now I guess we have a chance to, maybe have a, wait for you to
Yeah.
clear up your
You
glasses
gotta
a
see
little
now.
bit.
Well, just sit up here or something?
Yeah, pull up here.
Sorry, you're stuck with me tonight because Dean's away in Mexico, so.
Oh,
guy.
poor
Yeah.
Dean, eh?
Yeah, poor guy.
And then
So-
you have to miss the hockey game now, look at that.
Well, they're starting at 8, so it actually, because the bus got stuck coming up here, so.
So you're gonna wrap up your report quick, eh?
Yeah, no questions, you can ask Dean in a couple of months, So, I guess just a couple things that I'll kind of emphasize that he'd asked me to. We're trying to put more emphasis onto the curfew checks and things like that. With our numbers being down in the detachment membership wise and everything that went on this summer, the numbers did drop a bit and we did see a slight increase in B&Es and stuff happening, but we're kind of putting it to the guys now, trying to get a few more curfew checks done, trying to keep the ones that are the prolific ones, trying to keep them home at night. Doesn't always work because they can take off after we check them, but at least we're doing what we can with what we got. So those have definitely gone up over the last while here. That Tri-Community Capture initiative that we're trying to get rolling. There have been some people contacting us to get their names. That's that one with anyone with video that's willing to provide their name and their address so that we kind of have an idea of where the video is in town. It speeds things up if we know that we can go to person A and take a look at their video in an area. And I don't know if you guys realize just how much the video for that murder we had in Air Ronge there in January, it was all through video. We tracked him right from where he started in Air Ronge, right to the murder and away from the murder right to his house, pretty much. And it was awesome. That's what saved us, was the video. If it hadn't been for that, who knows if we ever. So if you guys could kind of help us and promote it through your website and whatever, however you get stuff out there, I guess Facebook or Twitter or all those social media that I really don't understand, but
Do they just contact the RCMP?
yeah, they can just contact us and provide their name and an address. And I mean, the biggest thing to put out there is that we're not gonna be, like, don't have access to their cameras unless they give it to us. So it's not like once we have your name and we're gonna secretly go into your camera and be watching all the time, sort of thing. And you know, some people, they are never sure about these things. So it's, if something happens in their neighborhood, they could call and say, hey, or we can put it out there. We had an incident in whatever, you know, on Studer Street. And then anyone who has cameras along there, they could call and say, yeah, I've got a camera, or, you know, you can come and take a look at mine, or we can call or go stop by those houses and say, hey, could you look between these hours? And just see if we can try and identify who's the one that's doing this stuff. So if you guys can kind of push that, there, like I said, we do have had some, but they're slowly coming in. But I think we just need a bit of a push maybe, and get things rolling that way. The one thing you might notice when you're looking through the actual numbers under mischief, those numbers can appear very high due to the fact that if we get a call that there's someone maybe intoxicated in a residence and they just want them removed, it's scored as a mischief, but it's not that they're damaging something, but not letting someone enjoy their house. or their residence, and that's also a type of mischief. So that's why those numbers can be, it doesn't mean that we've got, I can't remember how many it was there, 17 or 792, but a lot of that's probably just people needing to be removed from a residence or something like that. So, but you can see the numbers are quite a bit higher. I think we're 162 higher than this time last year. So whether it's, some of it might be that there is more damage being done, but there might also be just that, as we're finding, the drinking is, as we all know, it's probably one of our biggest thorns in our sides and creates a lot of our workforce. So that's where that number is quite high at 792.
Is the 435 for liquor related offences, is that captured within that as well, or are those counted separately?
Sorry, I gotta read back to that page. Sorry, which one was that?
Liquor related offences is 435, and then the property.
Oh yeah, is liquor related just down where it's
Yeah.
689 up to this time?
For the town, I think that's the.
Or is that maybe
region.
the whole thing?
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, liquor related. Oh, okay, 435. Yeah. So that would be like the drunks in public downtown. That's why
Okay.
that number would be. That's where anything where there's a drunk in public would
Yeah.
fall under that.
Okay,
The mischiefs would be the drunks in a house.
yeah,
The liquor
Or-
acts would be when they're outside.
okay,
So we can't charge them with mischief usually outside
Okay,
because
so-
they're not creating, unless they're in your yard and maybe causing so you can't enjoy them.
so the 792 is not including,
No,
the
that
435.
wouldn't be the 435, no.
okay,
And I mean, if you look at the 435, I'm gonna guarantee probably 95% of it's along Orange Avenue.
yeah,
Because that's where most of our liquor acts take place, as we all know.
Yeah.
With our growing, seems to be a growing population of
Mm-hmm.
homeless that, some of them are still around from 10 years ago when I got here, but we've lost most of those ones, and now we're getting the new crop. It just seems like there's a new crop coming in and more of them, I think. Seems to be more farther north. Wollaston seems to have a lot down here. They come down for a medical and end up staying for a while,
Mm-hmm.
missing flights or their vans because they're out drinking and causing problems. So I know a lot of times we look at these and it's just a lot of bad news because we just see big numbers all the time in some of these things, but over the last 5 days we've had 4 different files in town. There was one on the reserve, one on the highway, or 2 on the highway and 1 in town here, that we've taken 6 guns, over 100 grams of cocaine, and over 10,000 cash in the last 5 days. So the one we did a kick on a house out on the reserve that got us a small amount of product and cash. The one in town here, the guy was staying at the Motor Inn using it as his base, and we were able to get a loaded handgun from him, a shotgun. I think he had 7,000 or 8,000 in cash. So we put a nice dent, and he's one that's been kind of supplying here and Creighton, I think. So the guys have been out and made some good stops. And then we got one of our prolific guys that's been hauling a lot of stuff up here. Picked up yesterday on the highway, I think. He didn't have any product with him, but we got another gun out of him. So it's we've got a second member kind of working GIS. One of our guys that has been off duty sick since the shooting is just coming back, and he's been helping out in there, just giving a second body. He can't do much because he's just admin technically, but he's really helping just the member that's in there. That we only have 1 of 3 right now, and he just feels a little more confident doing stuff, having another body with him. So that's really helped, and we're hoping to get a few more seizures here in the next while. And then the corporal that's supposed to be coming in to fill in for the GIS spot, we're hoping, just waiting on medical clearance, his medicals to clear, and then it should be a fairly quick move for him because he's in a force house, coming to a force house. So hopefully just into December, give or take, that he'll be here. We've got another corporal coming from Pierceland, that, again, just waiting on medicals and stuff. That seems to be where our holdup is, just getting everyone cleared to get here. and his wife is a member, will be coming to that CRT, that 6-man unit that they're putting into town here, that new unit they created in April. So until they get that up and running, she's actually gonna help our GIS unit, so that'll be another body in there, so that's, it's looking a little better than what we have been. And then, we have 3 constables, one hopefully in the next 3 or 4 weeks, and then there's 2 that are coming that are 3-year members that hopefully by near the end of December, we'll have them here as well, by the time we get them from their 2 posts, so. There's still that light, it still seems like it's a little far away, but it's a little brighter than it was. We were hoping to have most of them here by now, or within, but, I mean, getting the housing built, we're just about done. I think we've got a 4-plex, a duplex, and a house that have just been built. The house is ready for someone to move in, the duplex I think Monday, and they're hoping the 4-plex by early December. So that's been a bit of a, once we get that, I'm sure we're gonna see members wanting to come here. I really do, because I haven't talked to a member that didn't wanna come here, but the housing prices and the cost of living here just scares them off. So, I mean, once we get some of this really rolling, I think that's really gonna help us in our numbers game, getting some experienced people instead of just depot, and it just seems like we're just getting them rolling and ready to play, and it's time for them to leave. So, instead of getting here ready to go and maybe 2, 3, 4-year member and ready to go.
Yeah, for the number of cases we have, we shouldn't be a training ground, we need to get some
and
experience here.
And that's where hopefully with getting the housing, that'll bring us more experience in instead of just relying on depot, because they don't have a choice, they gotta come here if they get told to, and that's kinda how it's been. It's kinda like, guess what?
How many vacancies are we at right now?
I think we're running at about 11 of 28. Like, we're really, really down.
We have 11 of 28.
We're 17 of 28 right now, I think. Because between suspension, mat leave, people off sick, just vacancies to begin with, we're down.
11 guys.
Yeah, and so we've actually just, yesterday I got an email, they're sending us a member from Pierceland for 2 to 4 months, so that's another body that'll help fill out one spot. If I can get the guy from Attackakuk that's coming, I'm hoping with the house being ready, the duplex ready Monday, I think that's what he's moving into, so now we can hopefully get the moving trucks rolling in the next 2 to 3 weeks and maybe get him here fairly quick, so that'll be another body. And we're slowly getting the 2 that were involved in the shooting this summer, they're both back, but they're both of course not up to full speed yet, so hopefully in the next month or so those guys will be as well, and that just fills a couple more holes that we're kind of down.
Quick question about just staffing levels. So this detachment's meant to have 28 members currently. And I'm looking between La Ronge, PA, Meadow, La Loche, Pelican, Buffalo, and Wollaston. La Ronge has significantly the highest calls for service. So versus PA, for example, how many members are they staffed up with?
Off the top of my head, I can't say. I know they're short.
But are they supposed to have the same?
No, they would be definitely less than us.
Okay.
And when you look at them, I think I don't know how much less, but I don't think they have quite as many as we do. And I mean, their file load is only 700 less than us, and I think they're running with less members. So, and they cover a huge area.
Yeah.
That's the problem with them. And like Meadow Lake, I think they're pretty good for numbers. I don't think they're running too low, but they went to kind of what we went to this summer last year for a whole year, where it was just about every day they had a drive-by shooting there. It was ridiculous, because I get the situation reports that come out, and just about every day there was houses shot at, apartments shot at, they had a shootout right at the 7-Eleven in town, like it was just day after day, and then it's kind of calmed down there, and now Onion Lake and Loon Lake, both valves really exploded recently, so it's all through the north. The gangs just keep kind of moving, trying to take over areas. I mean, even Stanley Mission had the one gang starting to move in up there. So it's just, there's not a community in the north here right now that doesn't seem to have some sort of a gang problem, and that's starting to become where we get the problems. Like the guy that did the shooting here, he's not even from here, he's from all across. What's he doing in town here other than dealing or for no good, right? So, and that's the problem, you got these guys coming in and you know, we've caught a few of the really bad ones here in the last week and a bit. We've put a couple that have caused us a lot of files into custody, but now keeping them there is the tough part. We catch them, they let them out, we start all over again. So, but you know, a lot of the time you look at those like the file numbers, you know, people say Pelican Arrows is busy, and they've got a lot of members, probably as many as we're running with right now, and they're half our files. So, you know, we're supposed to be at 28, and if we listen to the reports that they gave us, what was it, last year, the year before, we should be at 15 more members on top of that, just to be able to be proactive, just to allow us to be out there and doing more. And so they keep telling us we're gonna get these members, but when Depot's running troops of 5 instead of 30, our numbers are so down in recruiting and that. So if you guys know anyone who wants to become a cop, this is the time to do it, because it's so hard. Like, we've been so bashed in that it's just taken the prestige out of being a policeman and protecting our community and taking it, and we're really hurting for numbers. So, and we were supposed to get a bunch of cadets this year, but now with Depot pretty much shutting down almost at times, we're not gonna get the numbers we should be getting. Saskatchewan was supposed to get 200 new members this year, just from Depot. And I don't think we're gonna get there, just because they're running troops they're canceling a lot of troops, and then like I've heard that one troop went to with 5, like they're supposed to be 30 to a troop. So
That's rough.
yeah, and it's, you know, we just keep working with what we got, trying to, and then, you know, we get some this weekend when you get these 5 files or 4 files, whatever it was, and all these guns and coke and some money off the street. I mean, it's just a
It's a
dent.
win.
It's not.
It's a
It's a
win.
win, but there's so much more out there that if we could just have the right number of people, it'd be really nice. But got a lot of young guys that are working their tails off to try and get where we need to be. So luckily we've got a good group here, and so far they're still going. But you know, burnout is very possible too. That's the sad part of it. Is you can only push guys so hard so long that before they give up.
Well,
And
the
walk
work's
sick.
appreciated.
Yeah, so I think that was everything that he had on my to-do list here.
Just out of curiosity, how many curfew checks do you have to do, and how often do you have to do them? Every night?
They're supposed to be doing them every night. Like when I first got here 10 years ago, we'd go Friday, Saturday nights. That was when we'd do them, because that was usually the nights that most of the kids were out. Now things have changed where, I mean, we all see it. There isn't a night in La Ronge that you can just say, oh, there's not much gonna happen. Like down south, Friday, Saturday are party nights, the kids go and party, then the rest of the week it's usually pretty good. That's the problem with up here, pretty much every night's a Friday night up here, it seems like they're just always drinking somewhere, there's always money out, so there's always something going on. And if you look at, like, a lot of our last murders have been like, I think a Sunday night, a Tuesday night, like you can't even try and say, okay, we're gonna put lots of people these nights because that's a busy night. Up here, every night's like a weekend night sort of thing, so. But the guys should be checking every night. I think we have 15 right now, kind of on our priority list that we wanna keep checking. Some nights are just too busy to even get a chance to do them,
Those are the high enders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we kind of work with probations and say, okay, who's our high flyers, who's prone to do this type of file, and then we put them on a list, and the guys have that list that they can go and check every night. So, and we have to stay on them because, as we know, sometimes the guys, they get so involved in all their files that it's all of a sudden it's 3 o'clock in the morning and they haven't done any because they've just had their noses in their files trying to get caught up too, so.
Okay, any comments, questions for Sergeant Nickel? Well, thank you for coming out tonight.
No problem.
And the report, appreciate that.
And like I say, you know, if you have questions or issues, whatever, just give us a call at the office or bring it, you know, if you're hearing stuff that, Because sometimes we're the last ones to hear it, and at the detachment, you know, as community members, you hear stuff and know stuff that never makes it to our ears, so, you know, if you're hearing something that's going on, like actually one of the tips to get one of these was just someone complained to someone who worked at the office that their neighbor seemed to have a lot of traffic at their house. Bang, we get 8,000 cash and a bunch of coke and a couple of guns, so, I mean, that's all it takes.
Yeah.
Sometimes just Crime Stoppers make some money on it. If it leads to it, could be some money in their pockets. It's another way to do it, and not have to give your name up to the gangs sort of thing, so.
Great. Thanks.
Good.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Okay, well, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Have a good meeting, and go Wolves.
Go.
Be safe out
We'll
there.
be done by
Yes.
10 after 9.
10 after 9. Well, the game's starting late, so you might
Yeah,
be able to get there for the
We'll
third
finish the second
period.
half of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks guys. Have a good night.
Good night.
Okay, we'll
I'll move to enter
Okay,
public
we'll enter
hearing.
into public hearing. Public hearing bylaw 672/22.
Do we need a
Okay,
motion
we'll
for that?
convene the hearing, the public hearing following,
Oh,
okay.
Get a seconder on the motion to go into.
I'll second that.
Motion carried. Okay. Public hearing in the following bylaw 672/22, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 572/16. Summarizing the notice of the hearing, we will first hear from administration, who will provide us with an overview of the application, followed by the opportunity of the applicant to be heard. And then we'll open the floor if there's anyone here to express any interest in this property.
Thank you, Your Worship. So bylaw number 672 has the effect of amending the town zoning bylaw number 572 to add a definition for tow truck dispatch and towing yard, and including it is a permitted use in both the M1, which is the light industrial district, as well as the M2, which is the general industrial district. The bylaw stems from an application by Wayne North Towing with respect to its property at 520 Finlayson Street, wherein it was discovered that the town zoning bylaw did not include a provision for the establishment of a tow truck business in its zoning districts. So at that point, bringing forward the application, the bylaw was drafted up to include a definition and as well as a permitted use of tow truck dispatch and towing yard in those two industrial zoning categories, which includes the applicant's property at 520 Finlayson. Thank you.
Does the applicant wish to say anything?
I would like to, I moved here just to try and provide a service that I know has been needed up here, and just looking to become part of the community and support community things and everything.
Has there been any correspondence received from any public?
No, Your Worship.
Okay. Is there any people, members here from the public who wish to speak? Seeing none? Okay, we'll call for can we get a motion to close the public hearing and reconvene the regular council meeting?
Also move.
Okay.
I'll second.
Charles, second, Council Ledry. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion is carried.
I'll move to enter committee of the whole.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion is carried. Okay, we'll move to our snow and ice response policy. It's, I guess we've all had a chance to look at it. Are there any comments or any discussion around the new policy as it's drafted?
I have talked with a few residents out in the industrial area. There is some concerns with the back road. It's it's usually one of the last to get plowed. The residents out there are actually taking their own equipment and clearing it. Because part of it, we do have an industry back there. For example, trucks go into the back and they haul fuel, and if it's not cleared, we're looking at an accident, right? When we got, I guess they call them B trains, going back there. So that, I also had residents contact me about the sidewalks on Studer Street and Boardman there, because their biggest complaint was, why are our kids walking on the road, you know, to school and that, which I completely understand. Our kids shouldn't be walking on the road. And the other complaint, of course, the downtown sidewalk. I don't know, I'd like council to actually talk and maybe think about asking crews to start, because here's the other thing I'm looking at too. Why are we clearing snow during the day when the downtown is busy? You look at other municipalities, how they're run. They do their clearing at 3 o'clock in the morning and they shut down by noon, right? They're doing it that way. So I think more would get done. And I'm not talking about, you know, doing residential areas. I'm talking get the downtown done, all the priorities, get the sidewalks cleaned up, and then next day, you know, kind of wrap up with them getting into the going back to regular hours and doing the residential areas while people are at work, right? It to me it makes sense, and I'd like to know how, you know, rest of council feels about that kind of a recommendation.
I agree with that kind of thing. Councillor Vetri, it would sure be nice if we could have at least the downtown or the main arteries cleared before all the businesses open downtown, because it is going to cause an accident at some point when equipment's moving snow around and trucks downtown loading snow up, when people are trying to utilize all the amenities downtown there. So I think that would be great if we can do something with that. A couple things about in the industrial area where the row of businesses are along Finlayson Street. In particular, this has happened quite a few times where the graders, the landowner or the business operator clears their snow first thing in the morning before the town's out to do the roads, clear their snow right down to the parking lot, and then the town comes by and grades all a big windrow in front of their business. And a lot of those businesses, it's not just an approach to access it, it's the entire width of the property. The opposite side of the road, there's absolutely nothing there. If there's a ditch, can we not blade the snow that direction?
I heard kind of the same thing too, Councillor Clausen, and from my understanding, like, why aren't we going down like the left side of the road and pushing it towards the ditch instead of doing a pass down this way and then driving back this way?
It only makes sense.
It would only make sense
both directions
to do it that way, right? Yeah,
We'll just keep the back and forth here a little bit, just to get more to finish on your points there.
Yeah, so there was that point about just the direction of where that snow's going, so it doesn't have to be moved twice, especially after someone already has, and it impedes their opportunity to run their business, where you can't access sometimes because of what in some cases is almost an intentional thing. One other thing about the snow removal policy that I'm not really fond of is there's some areas in town where it can just be bladed into the ditch and left there, and then we see trucks and loaders and everything hauling all that snow away. Like, there's a lot of places we can just leave it there instead of wasting all the money to move it again every time. I know there's some areas that does have to be done, but there's a lot of places where it could just be bladed into the ditch and left there to melt, instead of moving and hauling it and wasting all that money. So.
Councillor Rui,
I would be in favor of the snow crews starting earlier, possibly working 4 a.m. till noon, which is an 8-hour shift. And then having like a second crew come in for the rest of the day, especially with like really heavy snow days. It is supposed to be really heavy snowfall this winter, is what the prediction is in terms of, you know, like what all the indicators are saying. And it is hard for people that are trying to get to work in the morning, or even youth trying to get to school, getting stuck. Like, I know our first snowfall, and I know it was the first snowfall, we weren't necessarily predicting it. I was stuck. I was trying to get to work. It was 8 a.m. and I was stuck, right? So not a lot of fun. So clearing those arteries, starting maybe like at 4 a.m. having almost like a scaffolded shift, I think that might benefit some of the snow clearing efforts that are being made.
I think if we generally look at the policy, like, you know, the priority and all of that, and this included in here, that's one issue. If we want to try and get some provisions for earlier clearing, that's maybe something that needs to be just added to the actual policy. But in terms of capturing everything, what actions are taken and the priorities and all of that, I think if we can agree that that is acceptable, and then if we want to add some points to that, then we can have administration try and fit those in terms of how to make sure that we can accommodate those pressure times, you know, when we get a big storm and early start. Councillor Vederick?
The other thing too I'd like to point out is the truckers and that, they really have nowhere to go, and that's why it's important to keep that industrial ground road open, because that way they can at least pull in there, right, and park. I see they're in the co-op again, and it's going to be crappy if they get kicked out of there, right?
The one thing, pardon me, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'll do it after you.
I'm fine.
The one thing I noticed is we have a clause in the snow clearing that we cannot push snow into another property that isn't ours. And so we have to make some provision in the policy to allow snow dump areas to deal with the industrial area. And I know I've talked a little bit with Lyle about this, and I guess the issue of pushing snow seems to be causing some damage to the roads in some cases where they're pushing the gravel off the roads. So rather than allowing pushing, it might be dumping the snow directly to those areas, whether you bucket it over instead of just pushing over the road. Any thoughts about that or conversation around that? Because right now in the policy, there's nothing that allows that to happen, because the policy straight across the board says you can't do it. But so unless we put a clause in there that we identify dumping areas, then we're contravening our bylaw allowing that to happen. So we have to address it somehow. Okay.
Okay, so nice revision. Makes a lot more sense, a little more clear as to how the policy's written. It's a little more easily interpreted. Sidewalk snow removal priority looks good, but maybe there should be, like, in the sense of understanding when things will get cleared, creating a couple more priorities so that it can be broken up a little bit more among the sidewalk clearing. I don't know if this is just like one day you can do priority 1, one day you can priority 2, and the man hours work like that. I don't pretend to know how the operators go around doing their jobs, and leave that to you guys. So it's nice to see that, like, it's explicit with the sidewalk clearing. And it is the school routes, the general school routes, which is good, and hopefully people clear their sidewalks. My street's poor at doing that. The understanding the Appendix A, there's priority 1, which includes Orange Ave and all the emergency main routes, but there's also little snippets of priority tucked into Nunn Street, Thompson, Sonat, and on Reese. Is that just the hills? Okay, to make sure that they're bladed and sanded.
Because you have to remove snow before you can treat them.
Yes. Okay. And I'm curious the efficiency of that. If there's a way that we can kind of add value to the machines going down those streets, because it's an awful long way from other priority areas. Like, is there a way to just do like a sweep and clear, or is it kind of efficient in the way that you've set it out, and there's no way to capture a little bit more snow removal for some of the residential areas while you're doing that? I don't know. Just curious.
I mean, I can have Mr. Morasti speak a little bit to some of the more technical parts of the removal process, but I'm imagining those 3 snippets in the residential area that would be the furthest away from priority 1, that if those are done likely in and around the time that they start priority 2.
Yeah.
But
That-
again,
yeah.
depends how dangerous it is, depends if we need to respond right away. I mean, it's nice to have a plan. I think Mike Tyson said it's all nice to have a plan until someone hits you in the face.
Mm-hmm.
And the snow kind of hits you in the face sometimes, or the
Mhm.
ice, or whatever it is. So, but I'll let Dwayne maybe speak to the 3 pockets there in the neighborhood if he wishes.
Councillor Clausen?
I think he was calling on Dwayne first.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, as for the hills that are taken care of as priority 1, the reason why we only do the hills is because by the time the grader gets out and get things windrow, we're able to get those hills done. If we spend more time on that, then it takes away time from picking up that windrow after the grader has everything centered.
Okay. That's a sufficient response for me. The only other question I had was, I saw in here when I was reading about residents being able to move snow into snow dumps, into municipal snow dumps. Is that requiring permission, or is that just an outright blanket permission for residents to move their snow into municipal snow dumps?
So the current version of or the previous, however you want to say that, of the policy had the permission written into it, and we've drafted the new one without specific permission.
Yeah.
Mostly because administratively, it's unlikely people are gonna, that we want to respond to all those requests.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably easier for us to close a snow dump if we have concerns about the level of activity,
Right.
and then do education to the public that, hey, we've got too much snow in this area, we've closed this particular dump for whatever reason.
Yeah.
We just thought that might be an easier approach.
Right. And I guess when it comes to snow dumping, there are really no, there's quite a bit of snow on L'Orange Ave, and a lot of businesses that have to remove snow around their buildings, and sometimes it gets pushed into areas, and the municipality, I know, doesn't like that. Is there a way for business owners downtown to be able to arrange for specific places or times for snow removal to move larger amounts of snow, so that we're not blocking snow like sidewalks, and we're not creating large bump outs on the street with that amount of snow? Because there's some properties downtown that don't have anywhere to put snow, so it winds up in like a wall between the sidewalk and the street or something like that. Is there can business owners call administration to figure out solutions, or what would you suggest in that case?
Well, the way the bylaw is written is that a private owner has to come up with a solution for their needs. So
Okay.
whether that's a residence or a business,
Yeah.
if it's a super heavy snow dump and you're having to, that means you have to shovel from driveway into the middle of your yard, so be it.
Yeah.
That would be the first response. I mean, if they're piling it on their property or on the edge of a property in a corner or whatnot, generally probably wouldn't be an issue for the municipality unless it obstructed sight lines or something, and then we would ask them to knock it down to a reasonable level. But that's generally our involvement. If they're pushing it onto our property or the roads, then they're doing something they shouldn't be doing.
Okay. And that includes any snow from the sidewalks?
Well, in the residence, we have the provision in the policy that if we haven't cleared the street, that they can push it to the gutter, and then we'll deal with that. So from the sidewalks, because that's public property, that's fine, as long as they follow that kind of guidance.
Okay.
But if they're pushing from their private parking lots or private driveways, they should be either have a plan on site for that or be paying someone to remove it to a snow dump.
Okay. Thank you.
So can we have clarity in the bylaw in regards to public dumping and the use of the snow dump areas?
Yeah, I'm taking some notes here, so with regards to allowance for the ditch use in the industrial, I'll make some revisions.
I guess that's the consensus of the council. You think? I think it should be open to the public. You know, we shouldn't be having to have each resident make a separate application. I think we should have a general
Under the new policy, it is pretty clear that it's just,
It's just wide open.
yeah, it's what's the wording?
It's a public snowdon. is
Yeah.
basically, yeah.
Well, it's, yeah.
But your comment about the ditches in the industrial, we can provide some language around that, just so people know they're not contravening if they do that.
Yeah.
That we can look at, we'll review administratively some of the comments around blading and stuff like that into the ditches. We have in the draft policy that the no response would start at 5 a.m. We can talk about what the implications would be of even pumping that up a little bit earlier. And then the last part probably is, last comment I had was around, by pumping it earlier, we really still can't do shifts, because at the end of the day, we have 7 public works staff and 6 pieces of equipment that respond to snow response. So we, generally speaking, what happens is, if we have 7 staff and then we get down to, let's say, 5, we probably still can do a pretty reasonable response and people wouldn't notice. Once we get below 5 staff, for whatever reason, illness, sickness, injury, what have you, then it starts to impact the plan, and that's when things slow down. So like for today, for example, there's part of the day where we only had 2 staff. So that's an extreme situation, but so sidewalks might not be being hit, 1, because it was lots of snow, but 2, because we might be short staffed. And that's where also there's a challenge in putting in either a shift rotation, because you would need a whole nother crew available, so we'd have to almost double our staffing levels, which I don't think anyone would like to see the bill for. But we certainly could give you a cost if there was interest in that. And then the second issue would be around whether, the staffing complement is around. So what we're doing internally right now is just talking about, unfortunately, when we drop to a certain staffing level, then we would trigger contractors if they can help. But the problem is they're typically also very busy when we would need them. We're also going to be we look at other departments that can have staff that have capacity to assist. So what we're going to be doing, like tomorrow we're going to have a staff meeting, we're going to chat a bit about it, but and we have an item on the agenda around a piece of equipment that we can use to better do sidewalks with. It's also a piece of equipment that we don't have to have a highly skilled operator use, so if we do get a heavy snowfall, can we call in a parks operator to come in on overtime and do some sidewalk removal for us, take some of the burden off staff that are focused on streets and things like that. So we're trying to come up with some solutions that are more procedural, which is where a lot of the comments are coming from. But that's some of the challenges is, 1, the service level, because we do sidewalks here, which more sidewalks than many municipalities would do, and 2, the staffing challenges obviously is always a concern if we start losing staff, and then the actual procedural piece of it. So for the most part, based on the fact that in the last couple of snow events we've only had like between 2 and 4 staff responding, it's been pretty good. Would we have liked to be a little faster? Yes. Would we have liked to have hit the sidewalks and Studer and things like that? Yes. But we've just been short-handed, unfortunately. That's part of the problem.
Yeah, well, and the only reason why I mentioned 3 o'clock in the morning is, because battling traffic, and I don't know, maybe Dwayne could testify to this, but like when they're trying to clear downtown, there's people going around and then they have to wait. So my kind of idea behind it wasn't actually to run another shift in the afternoon, because if they're doing snow removal all day and that's their only job, that's fine. But why don't we start it at 3 and end at 11 or 12, and then they can have the rest of the day off to do whatever, right? It is kind of my thought process.
I would agree, and I'll sit down with Mr. Morasky. Like, I think the intent was anyway that whatever that response time be, that would give adequate time to get LaRange Avenue done before heavy traffic hits it, and then then they would start moving into the other priority 1 and 2 areas eventually. So we'll review that and come up with a recommendation in the last version of the policy we bring back, but that's the intent.
Councilor Bouchard?
I just, I'm not sure if you have this on hand, but I think one thing, like from a council consideration or even just resident considerations, how much are we willing to spend to get the level of service that we're discussing? So what, do we know what we spent last winter, 2021-2022 winter season? Do we know how much we spent on snow removal? And I guess what follows from that is, does this policy look to provide similar or better level of service for the same cost? Or does it provide some efficiencies in it possibly, which I expect it will every time we review this policy, which is like, I don't know, what are we on, version 10 now? It's about, are we meeting the service levels? And, there's always going to be people that ask for a higher service level and don't think that the municipality's doing enough, but we can put a number to it and we can give that to residents and say, okay, we're spending this much, which is this percentage of our tax revenue, and are we prepared to tack a 0.1, a 0.5% on to edge that level of service up? And like, I'm fine having that discussion. It's just a matter of like being able to like quantify it and put some rationale behind it, and also understand that we spend, I don't know, in the range of however many hundreds of thousands of dollars every year on snow removal. So, and it's okay if you don't have that number.
No, we can do some work in informing you on that. I mean, most of it is our staffing complement for the winter, plus an allowance for contract and overtime support. So we can give you some information on that. Are the revised policies more efficient? The policy hasn't changed much. Like this draft, in terms of like how we respond, hasn't changed. It's more the process and equipment. So like we looked at a snow blower previous budget. We looked at now sharing a piece of sidewalk clearing equipment. Could that make it so that we have more options to respond and not be as hard hit when staff aren't available? Those are the kinds of efficiencies we're looking at. But yeah, if you want to tie like a response time or do rotations or just even like adding like, so let's do, for example, in the policy right now, we don't have definitive response times where we say within 12 hours we get priority 1 roads done or that kind of thing. And we could maybe for priority 1, but once you go past that, it really depends on so many factors that it would be really hard to guarantee. Like today, if 2 people show up to work, that's a problem. We're never going to hit that mark. And then we don't want to be sued because we said we would do something, right? Yeah. We're doing it's more written that no, we're going to do the best we can, and it's in this order.
I live on the street that gets plowed last, typically, and you just kind of like clear your driveway and then fishtail down the street until you get to the cleared priority 1 street, and that's fine. Like, I'm fine with our response. I think we have a pretty damn good snow removal response, especially for the size of the municipality, size of the staffing, things like that. I think just in our budgeting process, when it comes to capital and operating, having some of those numbers pulled out might be a really good communication tool for councillors when discussing these items with residents that maybe are or aren't happy, just to have an understanding and some sort of benchmark to pinpoint, to say, okay, valid, like everybody that has concerns about our snow removal is valid. It's just a matter of like, okay, we spend this much. So,
and it's good, and we can provide some information, and then also what I've been talking to staff about too is also about communication. So like if we have an abnormal day where 4 staff are out of action for some reason, let's put that on Facebook. Let's communicate that out. Let's ask for patience when we have that kind of extreme situation. Let them know that we're trying our best, but we're just shorthanded. Yeah. Or if equipment breaks down or that sort of thing.
I'll just make one comment before you get sort. I think that's a good idea. If when we get the snow blower, let's put it out there. We got the sidewalk cleaner, put it out there. So the residents know that are trying to improve our efficiencies and you know, just to make it safer for everybody. Okay, Councilor Clausen?
Yeah, just a couple more comments, and first off to Mr. Morosky, I think it needs to be said that overall the snow clearing in our community is actually quite exceptional. Regardless, you're hearing some negative comments around the table here, but I hope it's taken as constructive criticism, because no matter what we're talking about, there's always room for improvement. So, but overall, our snow clearing in this town is quite amazing. So, but there's a few things that we could tune up just a little bit. And secondly, Lyle, you answered some of these already, but I was wondering, should it be written into the policy specifically about using other departments or hiring private contractors if the load is exceeding a certain amount, that maybe at the discretion of the public works manager, or because sometimes it would just be a lot simpler just to hire a private group to help out from time to time.
Yeah, whether we put it in the policy or whether it's part of the procedure that we use, either way, that's what I was talking to Mr. Morasky about today, was just understanding that, okay, if we drop below X amount of staff, that triggers the contractor response, that can triggers phoning on call staff maybe in other departments that could help respond in some way.
Or even just if a snow load exceeds the capabilities that we have to get on top of things.
Yeah, if it's continuous, like that's usually the issue, is not the amount, but if it comes and just keeps coming and then keeps starting back at level 1 priorities, that can be quite a challenge. But yeah, we can look at that in terms of just some triggers. But in terms of other policies, we do have budget for those matters. So unless he's going over his the budget for contract support and overtime, then like if we had a really bad winter, then I would expect to come, you know, halfway through or somewhere in and give you a bit of a sense of, hey, it looks like we're trending towards being over budget on our contract support and overtime because of snow. Is council comfortable allowing us to continue to use that standard that we've talked about? So we'll give that some thought and we'll bring it back.
And again, like what Councillor Bashar was talking about with the trying to put a dollar number on what we actually spend on snow removal in a year, that would be very good to know so that we can make an informed decision on how to move forward.
We can definitely do that, sorry. And then just to know, like again, the challenge for the taxpayer is like a 1% tax increase is only $20,000. It doesn't go very far in terms of adding like 10% of the taxes to do better snow removal. So like that's 200,000. That would be like three, not even 3 staff, that would be 2 staff and some equipment maybe.
And I guess some tracking, like, I guess there's, how much contract is, awarded out. And I guess the second thing is tracking time and equipment time, those would be probably the main costs.
Yeah, just some metrics, tracking some metrics, simple ones, because I know how much of a pain in the butt it is to be tracking every little thing as you're using it or whatever, but if there's a way to instill some of those practices to just capture some of that, I think as a communication tool and part of a greater communication strategy, if we ever get there, would go a very long way for the municipality.
Yeah, like for just like round numbers, I can tell you, like if the snow season is 6 months, that's 7 staff times 50% of their time times their wages. I can very easily give you a ballpark. Like even if they're not doing snow removal, they're on call basically for snow at any moment.
And even just keeping track of the snowfall over the course of that winter. So we can look at 2021-22, 2022-23 and do a comparison. Okay, but this snowfall year was much heavier. This snowfall year was much lighter. We've got some savings, but we improved service, things like that, to be able to like communicate those differences, because I know there's lighter snowfall years that people are like, oh, you did great this year, and then the next year heavy snowfall and they're like, oh, you're
and I don't think this is going to be one of them, but it sounds
no, damn it.
But anyway, so it sounds like you got a little bit of tweaking to do, and then we'll bring it back at the next meeting for
the feedback.
Okay, we'll move on to downtown parking requirements, and we're looking for some direction on that.
Thank you, Your Worship. So staff have been encountering applications from developments, businesses in the downtown core, development permit applications, for example, where there may be a slight change in use and what have you. And as part of their exercise in reviewing those applications, we typically calculate things like off-street parking. And with the latest example of an application that came to council this last meeting, whereby we were talking about the applicant wanting to put a dwelling in their existing multi-use commercial building, I undertook to obtain floor plans and calculate, well, what would the parking requirements be for that entire building, and what are they providing now in terms of off-street parking? And what I found, and what we found in the past before I've come, and I've become familiar with some of these examples, is very often the parking requirements far exceed what they're able to provide on the property. And that may be relate to several factors, but there may be examples of legal nonconformity where things were done at a time when we didn't have certain rules in place, or uses were established when the rules were less stringent, or there was less oversight in some of these things. But so staff are looking for some direction from council in terms of a bylaw that we could bring forward that would help us to deal with those types of scenarios, that would allow businesses the flexibility to continue evolving and changing and adding and what have you, but not being overly punitive in terms of the amount of parking that we're requiring them to undertake. And once again, going back to my example of this dwelling on Orange Avenue, where I looked at the parking, I came to the conclusion that 20 parking spaces are required, but you'd be lucky if you could get 2 official off-street parking spaces on that property. So therefore, there would be a net requirement of 18 spaces. Well, that seems like an awful, large price to pay to be able to convert existing office space into a dwelling when there's really no net increase in the amount of parking that would be required overall. So, recognizing that there are some of these situations in our core, we would like to seek direction from you folks to embark on preparing an amendment that we could bring forward for consideration that would have the effect of allowing us to calculate the parking, say, okay, this is what would be required as things exist today. Here's what you're doing in terms of change. This results in a net increase of 4 additional parking spaces, and therefore pursue those particular 4 parking spaces as part of the solution, but not penalize them for what is there today. As you know, there are 3 options for dealing with off-street parking in the zoning bylaw currently. One is to actually provide those spaces on your site. Secondly, you can pay a cash in lieu of parking, which is $1,000 per space, which is money that the municipality takes in and then therefore is to provide forms of public parking in the downtown core. And then lastly, they can provide parking on different properties in proximity to the property that's subject to development, with an agreement with the town in place that ensures that parking is going to remain intact as long as the uses that were established and require that parking continue to exist. So we're just looking for there are 2 other potential ways we could look at this. We could say, well, we feel that our parking requirements are too stringent. And in my experience in looking at their parking requirements, I don't feel that they're overly stringent at all. As a matter of fact, a lot of the zoning bylaws I had experience with are more stringent, but we deal typically with floor area parking requirements, and we don't add things in for employee parking and what have you. There may be some room for improvements in those areas, but maybe that's something that we look at in more detail down the road. Maybe as part of our downtown revitalization plan and see what extends from that. Lastly, we don't have to do anything at all, but then that means that staff, because our hands are kind of tied with the zoning regulations, we have to tell applicants that unfortunately, unless you can meet these requirements, we can't recommend approval of your application because it doesn't conform to the zoning bylaw.
Okay, I'll open up for discussion.
I think at some point we are going to have to look at metered parking or an actual parking lot in the downtown area. And I say that because right now, as I guess overflow parking, the urban reserve is used when there's large events downtown, but that's not always necessarily going to be available for use, right? So I guess my question is, which of these options of the 3 presented here, and it seems to be the recommendation is for A, but I also say A, B, C, would be most conducive to transitioning at some point in time to either metered parking or some form of municipal parking lot in the downtown area?
Well, obviously we can do what we will with our own road allowances and how we treat on-street parking,
Okay,
right? And this is where I speak to the downtown revitalization plan and looking at what maybe we're gonna do with the streetscape, and how we might better delineate and demarcate parking and treat that as part of the overall, treatment of the Orange Avenue. We have this cash in lieu of parking, a tool available to us. In my opinion, it's quite a bit lower than what I'm used to seeing in other municipalities, $1,000 a parking space. I mean, it'd be awfully tough to, well, we do own a lot of land in the downtown, obviously, so that maybe is not so much a consideration, but obviously developing parking, is expensive, and maintaining it. That's one option. I did check with Trevor. We don't have really any money available to us at the present time, to utilize for that purpose. And so really that leaves us with very little option.
okay. Because I do know that when it's busy, it's hard to find parking downtown. If you're going to one of the restaurants that doesn't have their own parking, or if you're going to like one of the offices that might not have their own parking, sometimes you have to park far away. And it's not often, but it does happen.
Councillor Clausen?
Maybe this is something that has to revolve around the downtown revitalization plan, because really there is no more land down there or accessible parking. So if we're going to force people a certain requirement, maybe we need to ease that requirement a little bit. What else are we going to do? Make the L'Orange Avenue one-way and put angled parking to increase the parking capacity? Buy back properties to make parking lots? Like, all of these things are going to be quite expensive. So parking kind of is what it is in the downtown, and I don't know that there's a whole lot that can change with it, short of causing or doing some drastic measures that are going to be quite expensive. So I'd almost lean towards decreasing parking requirements.
Councillor Berry?
I'm kind of with Councillor Clausen on this one. I do agree it should be looked at more with the downtown revitalization team, because eventually we're hopefully going to be moving a lot of stuff out there, and the downtown core will be like more for tourism and stuff like that, and regular shoppers and stuff like that. That's kind of my vision on it anyways. So yeah, easing up on the parking requirements for a while, just to make things easier, seems like the most practical thing to do.
Just so council's aware, I mean, we are of the same opinion that we should wait in terms of a drastic change for the results of the planning process. What we're looking at is we don't want to stall development in the interim. We don't want to make things onerous. So we're trying to come up with like I said, a solution where the recommendation or something similar, but is essentially, I have this much office space, I needed this much parking before, I'm going to split this office that there's the same square footage, I need the same amount of parking spaces as I would have before, and so there's no net change, so we're not going to impose any requirement on you. Or if you are creating an addition or something that would require an extra stall, we're only going to really enforce the extra that you're creating, not the current situation. So whether it's that or whether it's reducing parking, those are really similar approaches, but
and that's exactly why I say to decrease those requirements for now, and then of course wrap everything back into that downtown revitalization.
Like I don't think that, given the open areas that we have downtown, and I kind of would like to wait until we get our report in, but I think we're at the end. I think we're probably going to have to reduce the requirements. Option A, what you have, but I don't know whether we, wait until we get a report to actually do that, or I don't know if it would impact it that much. I think it might be something that we may end up doing in the end anyway, because it's just the way it's written right now, and really cash in lieu doesn't give you any more parking, it just gets you a little bit of cash, and I suppose if you let it build up, you could, that still wouldn't be enough really to invest in some land, and the cost of that, it just wouldn't provide any really option, any options out there. So, Councillor Lettery?
I'd like to make the motion that administration go with Option A, and amend the zoning bylaw to require parking solutions for the net change and parking only.
Well, I'll second that, but I'll ask for discussion.
Okay, motion's on the floor, second, any, Discussion?
May I have a
Yeah,
turn
well,
to
you get a turn
comment? Okay.
now you get a turn.
Making motions before everyone's spoken to this, especially people that have been affected. The downtown right of way is huge. It has the ability to drive 2 semis with sidecars just straight down, like hot dog down a hallway kind of width. You can fit 2 F-350s going down there next to each other with snowbanks and the whole deal. Like, it's huge, the right of way downtown. You can fit angle parking, you can fit parking both sides pretty much the whole way down. There's also 1.5, being on the downtown steering committee and having like dug into a lot of these documents and like, you know, had some interesting discussions with different committee members. Like, the downtown is a giant corridor and it doesn't need to be that way. If you want to placemake, if you want to like have it feel like somewhere people want to be, then there's no reason we can't do a road diet. Our sidewalks are too narrow to begin with, our road width is too wide, and if we create more on-street parking, which then provides for relief of the need for off-street parking. For example, like just using the example of that I have in front of me of the cafe, that building was built on a site and rebuilt multiple times within bylaws that had no parking requirements, none whatsoever. That building is built on nearly like 90% of the lot that is accessible. There's no way to park on that site unless you park in front of the doors. And even there, you can't really get a car. So like, this building was permitted by the municipality to be constructed on the site in the footprint it has back when. And any new bylaws now apply, so therefore any new business, my business, the one opening beside me, any further businesses that locate into that building are going to be required to pay $1,000 per parking space you can't provide. There's about 3,000 square feet in that building that is vacant currently that could be used, and 3,000 square feet is probably going to require another 4 to 8 parking spots depending on what uses are put in there. And so if my business, the business beside, the businesses that are locating a couple places over that we recently had a permit for, are all being penalized $1,000 per parking space they can't provide on site. If they're penalized that, where's that money going? And what do we have in the pot? Like, do we have a number of what's in the pot from this bylaw? The 2016 zoning bylaw has put how much money in our coffers for transportation related and parking development? What, $6,000-7,000? Is that about what we're doing? Yeah. So do we continue on this path down the 1.5 kilometers of L'Orange Avenue in our downtown? Is that going to get us anywhere? Or does that just deter businesses from opening downtown? Especially if we're developing a corridor on the highway. Do we want to provide that level of competition to businesses that want to open downtown, small businesses that we're supposedly in favor of and want to help support? So like, I'm hearing from that side of the table, you're definitely in support of you know, relaxing some of these more stringent requirements and looking at other options. My thoughts are, for the downtown area, as a zone, policy-wise, do we need to, actually, to be honest, for the most part, I don't think the parking regulations in our zoning bylaw are fit. They don't fit with the context of L'Orange. They're too one-size-fits-all kind of more of a city type thing. I think there can be other solutions that are put in place that are, I don't know what it looks like, and that's not my job. But
And that could be part of the downtown revitalization, like we have
it will
some money
come-
put in there, and
that is part of the discussion.
so, I mean, if it means picking an area to provide some angled parking or those kind
Yeah,
of things that are gonna
in the
invest
wider
that area,
areas
that
of the
might be
street.
something that,
That's going to require the municipality taking that on, though, and removing the policy for specifically like downtown to
then if we
Yeah.
supply that parking, then we can actually justify charging that parking fee.
Why would we
because
charge a parking
Just-
fee,
I'm
though?
just kidding.
Just a point of order, like two
Yeah.
things, and I'll let council resume pretty quickly.
Mhm.
One, we don't need a motion, we're in committee. If
Right.
you wanna make a motion, you're recommending something to council. But as far as out of this meeting, we're looking for just direction, so we just need to hear like the majority thoughts around this. But also I would avoid pre-debating the whole issue.
Mhm.
Yes, we all agree that it's gonna be looked at, and whatever the solutions or options, we'll have lengthy debate at that time. Really, we're saying for an interim fix, do you want no parking in the downtown requirements, no parking requirements, or do you wanna just enforce a requirement where it's whatever new they're causing? That's really the two options, and we're just waiting for that as an interim issue.
Basically, we did have a motion on the floor to go with option A.
But we're
The motion's not in order because we're in committee.
Okay,
So-
but I mean, whether or not, but I
A
mean,
recommendation, like-
that's a start of
Yeah, like-
consensus, I guess.
Well, if the chair wishes to do a straw poll after everyone's had their
So-
say in terms of which way they want to go.
I'll put the question out there, those in favor of option A, raise your hands.
That's relaxing restrictions just on new development.
The new portion of application.
Any new applications.
I
Just
don't-
just to
They
clarify-
call it net.
Just to clarify, what we wanna do is in order to allow business to continue to evolve, we wanna be able to say, hey, here's what your parking requirement is today. We know you can't meet it, but we're only going to require that you satisfy parking with respect to the increase, with respect to that change only. Right? We're not gonna go back and penalize you for what was done yesteryear. That allows staff to get on with processing these things, bring them to the table for council's consideration, and provide us with an interim fix. Right? Down the road, we'll, as part of the downtown revamp and everything, I mean, I can go on forever about this topic, right? But this is just an interim fix for staff to be able to get on with bringing things to the table for you folks, because otherwise I'm just gonna tell people, listen, you can't meet the requirements. Thanks for your coming out.
Can you provide like an actual example, say for the vacant building beside the cafe, the old IGA, people would know it as. If that was to become a new development and it required, in our current bylaw, 6 off-street parking spaces, and it only has the ability for 4 cars to park there, what is the effect of what we're asking for here about the net change?
So you're saying that whatever's there now requires 4 parking spaces? But
It's
the change
vacant,
says
so
needs
it
6?
doesn't require any.
Pardon me?
It's vacant, so it doesn't really require any, but you could fit.
Well, in that situation, nothing's gonna change, right? You're
Okay,
still
but
gonna
if
be
you-
required to provide the parking in accordance with the bylaw. What I'm talking about is particularly those sites that have large lot coverage,
Yeah.
where most of the building covers most of the lot, they already have parking deficiencies,
Mhm.
right? We're just saying that, hey, we're not gonna get in the way of you being able to make shifts and changes within your building,
Yeah.
right? And if you do have a net increase in parking requirements as a result, you're only gonna have to address the net change, not gonna have to go back and revisit goal. But if you're talking about a vacant lot, somebody wants to come in and put a 2,000 square foot store in there, they're gonna have to meet the parking requirements in the bylaw. Through one of the 3 options they have available to them.
Right, so I don't like that as an option, because it's basically just penalizing businesses that you're gonna have to pay cash in lieu if you physically can't put more parking on site.
You have to take them on the
It's-
building.
That's the history we've been dealing with, like, I mean, that was a grocery store, and to say, where's the parking for it? You know, and I mean, these are decisions that we're battling now, that, you know, the building's still there and it's not a grocery store, but.
And this is what was problematic about like the bylaw being written the way it is, and I know we're not debating this, but right now when it comes to direction, for me personally, I would love to see that policy just taken out for the downtown. Like, parking policy, there was no requirement, or what was our 2000 bylaw that we had? What were the parking requirements in that one? Before adopting the 2016, our previous, what was it, the basic planning statement that we had, and that zoning bylaw, I don't recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there were any parking requirements in place. So, yeah, and that's the thing, is like, it went from
It probably didn't have any in the
nothing, and-
previous one.
and do we have any new development downtown? One. And so every other building that is being adapted for use, that has been vacant and is being used now, has to go through a process that is penalizing. And if we want to work towards revitalization, we need to relieve a lot of that pressure to be able to encourage small businesses and stuff to adapt those spaces, because we see multiple buildings downtown being renovated into smaller spaces, mixed uses, which are then increasing parking requirements, and net those little businesses are facing big challenges in the cost. So I'm just putting it out there that I don't think I want to support any
I guess the
parking
biggest thing
requirements
is we do have
in the
the
interim.
bylaw in place right now, and unless we amend it, we gotta enforce
Yeah.
it. So therefore, if we reduce the, the requirements in the interim until we find a better solution, that's kind of, I think, what's being presented to us.
It's just a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think that, like, if I'm understanding the question from Councilor Bashar correctly, is, like, if there was a commercial building right now that is full and it became vacant, but it's still the same commercial use, even though it's vacant, the parking requirements don't change. It depends if they want to change the use in a way that creates more parking requirements.
6 new cafes open
Sure, but-
in the
They'd have to be
old
new
Eddie's.
buildings though, right? Like new
No, but
developments.
new developments, yes.
Yes.
So Eddie's restaurant gets broken into 3 different businesses, and each have a pretty intense parking requirement based on our bylaw. So 1 per 20 square feet.
Because he's changing the use.
Yeah, so 3 new ones that supposedly in our bylaw require so much parking, but realistically, practically, there aren't that many cars that need to park there, or there's lots of street parking available, there's lots of other options for parking downtown, lots of side streets and so on and so forth. So why are we looking at that? Like, option B, to reduce the parking requirements for downtown, yes, you may require some additional parking, but like that option I think is a better one, to just reduce if it's in the downtown by 2/3 or 1/2 or something like the, so instead of a cafe or restaurant requiring 1 per 46 square feet,
Yes, 46
Yeah.
square meters.
then, or 5 seats, make it 1 per 10 seats, or 92 square meters, and really pushing that, because there is so much on-street parking in the downtown, and we can remove some of those yellow curbs too.
I think either relax or remove it totally.
What are the implications of removing all parking requirements for developments downtown?
And that would be my only question to Mr. Long as well, is like, the only danger with removing or dramatically decreasing would be, and it might be unlikely, but consider like if all of a sudden a business like Giant Tiger said, oh, I don't have to provide parking, I'm just gonna make my building bigger, and all that parking is now gonna have to be jammed onto the street. What would happen, right? So you just want to be a little bit cautious in terms of like, again, is that likely? Probably not, right?
No.
Like realistically, it's probably not, but that's what you'd be opening it up to if new businesses come in and say, oh, I can cover the whole lot.
What if we
right?
talk about, we
There's a lot
reduce
coverage bylaw as well.
mixed use, because now we
Percentage
have
wise.
permitted uses being deemed mixed uses if they're in the same building, if multiple uses are in the same building. So like, I don't know if you have any tools in your back pocket about, instead of the deeming something a mixed use to then increase the parking requirements. Because like a drugstore that was 3,000 square feet, turn that into 4 businesses, you're multiplying the amount of parking required because of seating. If
Well,
you have a
depends
cafe
on what the
going
use
in
is.
and a retail space and this, that, and that,
Right. That's what I'm
then
getting at with this whole approach.
yeah.
Right.
So you know what? I think I'm not sure if I'm being clear on the direction that I want things to go, but I don't know how to communicate it any better at this point. So I'm just going to leave that in your ballpark because I think you understand a bit.
Well, maybe one last comment.
Yes.
Okay, Larry?
The reason why I think number A is important, or letter A is important, option A, is for example, if we don't have this in place, we just had an A&W built, and without this in place, they could have used the whole property and not
It's
had
not
any
true.
parking.
Building bylaw requires you can only cover so much of your property.
Mm-hmm.
Zoning bylaw does actually,
Yeah.
but yes, that's correct, lot coverage.
Okay.
So,
And also
Not
that's a
saying that they
brand
would do
new
it or
development versus adaptive use of older
Yeah, but they're
construction.
saying that it's a net, right? So depending on what's put in there, right?
Any new buildings, I'm fine with having to meet parking requirements. It's when a building exists and you're ending up being penalized because you're trying to adapt a space into something that is reusing and revitalizing a really important part of our community, which people have complained for years has died.
Okay, we'll get back to the question here. I guess we're asked to give direction to administration in terms of which option is the best, and we did have I think we'll just go with option A. All those in favor of option A, because it seemed to be one that was chosen by motion. Okay. Councillor Clausen, what's your in favor or not?
No, to reduce.
Okay. Councillor Ruth?
I would say with B, decrease those parking requirements.
Decrease. Okay.
I'm not sure that any of the options on the report capture what I'm going for, but I believe I've communicated the essence of the outcomes that I'm seeking, and trust our administration is able to kind of work within those bounds and find a good solution to come forward with.
Okay, Jeff?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. One point I did want to make is that, at this point, if we do go with a decreased parking standard, let's say we decide to cut it all in half, just for the sake of argument, it's not going to solve our problem, right? Because when somebody makes an application to me for their property, I have to revisit the whole parking scheme for the property based on the uses that are present. So what I'm trying to do is say, hey, let's grandfather these folks in as it relates to their existing situation, and we'll only deal with the change. And if there is a net change in the parking requirement, in other words, it increases, then yes, they will have to deal with one of the 3 solutions in the bylaw. But if not, it's status quo. Staff can get on and bring the application to the table here for further consideration. That's all I want to do at this point, and then we'll just deal with things as time marches on.
Like for example, the one that applicant we have now, the 18 stalls that they'd be looking at, well, we could cut that in half, but he still doesn't have 9.
Still got to
So,
try.
I mean,
Right.
still would be facing an insurmountable challenge in that particular property, so,
But you're
probably
saying-
we'd have to look at none, or the solution that Mr. Long's
You're
suggested.
saying
Or
he'd
it's
be required to provide any new changes though, so he's applied for something, he won't be able to get it because we're gonna make him.
Correct. And he's
Pay
aware of that, and
$1,000
I've
per
said, I've
spot.
explained to him the situation, and I said, this is something we're running into continuously through previous examples, and I say, we need to put something in the bylaw because staff, for staff to be able to have direction legally, to be able to then process these applications and say they can conform, and the folks can address the parking issue more readily. In the example we were just talking about on Orange Avenue with the dwelling, but regardless of whether or not council wants a dwelling in there or not, the net increase in parking there is 0. So there won't be a parking requirement, but if we don't do anything about it, I have to say, sorry, you need to provide 18 parking spaces.
Okay.
That's what I'm.
So I think I understand correctly now that the 3,000 square foot building that is being adapted into multiple uses right now that the cafe exists in, the 1,500 square feet that say the new neighbor is developing, if they're required, if in that square feet, it's still a retail store, the 4 parking spaces they're required to provide, that would be no net increase, therefore no penalty. But if they were more intensive use that required greater parking, like 6 spots, then they'd have to pay the 2 above.
Exactly.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay, sorry. Okay, I am much more understanding of this now. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff, for
It's a
that.
lot more difficult concept to grasp than what it should be.
Even as
But even in your circumstances, if I may,
yeah,
you know, that calculation was approached inaccurately, and it should have been revisited for the entire building,
yeah.
and we don't want to do that.
Well, and it's the problematic ways that some of the policies are written that put the interpretation in a bit of a strange spot. And I'm glad we're addressing some of these now.
So I thank you.
Okay, so now,
Okay,
the majority
I'm going with
consensus?
A.
Okay, I'm in favor, so the majority is in favor.
That's
And we'll bring back the bylaw and if council has
Yeah,
more
yeah.
questions at that time.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
Opportunity.
Move to
Okay,
Rousing
well,
report.
that generated pretty good discussion, and thanks everyone for that.
I'll second the Rising report.
Okay. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Section 8, bye.
carried.
Thanks for your patience.
Okay, we will move to. Okay, we got bylaws, and we've got the,
Move that council give second reading to bylaw number 672/22.
okay, secretary,
I'll
Council
second.
Henry, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion is carried.
I move that we give the third reading to bylaw number 67222 that has the effect of amending zoning bylaw number 576/16 to add a definition for tow truck dispatch and towing yard, including it as a permitted use in the M White Light Industrial District and M2 General Industrial District.
I'll
Second.
second.
Okay, Council Bashar, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion is carried. Now you legally in business.
Thanks for your patience.
Thank you
Well,
for
we're
your,
to deal with, and then we'll
Yeah.
deal with that right away.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you. Thanks for your patience.
Make sure you guys buy it.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks for coming.
Move
okay,
to
we'll
approve
move to,
financial reports.
business, now financial reports.
Matt,
I'll
Council
move to
Crossman motion.
approve the financial reports.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
I just had
Any
one.
questions on the?
I just had one question. It was about an emergency, you know, and we're getting pizzas and stuff like that. Sorry?
Fire department.
Maybe it says something about emergency. Is that's fire department?
Yeah,
The guys wondering if they're having emergencies and just buying pizzas because it would look like it was happening quite a bit.
There was that. There was also the pizzas that we had for the Halloween with our wellness committee.
Okay.
But I'm pretty sure what, yeah, and yeah, there was the election as well for.
Oh yeah, it's GL account number 52545. It says emergency scene / TRAIR and then pizzas. So I was kind of just wondering.
That would be the fire department.
Okay. So yeah, training I guess that would be.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was refreshments during an extended response or it was just a training meeting that they brought people in for and then fed them. But
Okay.
we could get clarity on that. It'd be one of those two.
Any other questions on the accounts?
Yeah, actually, if you could get clarity on that, because there's 4 partners at the table when it comes to expenses, and if Laurent is the only one paying for the pizzas, that should be added.
Well, it is under the fire department budget, yeah.
Okay.
So basically, it would get split out amongst the other
Okay.
partners. So
Any other questions? We have a motion, seconder, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion's carried. 9.2, we have a list of accounts to write off that have been deemed uncollectible for various reasons. So, any questions on those?
I have a couple questions around that.
Okay.
So I would be okay with writing, excuse me, smaller amounts under $1,000 or at about $1,000, but I'm wondering if we could get more information on account number 54358, which is $4,884. Account 66300, which is $4,844 as well.
So I'll go through it. There's a few of them. First of all, I'll address the ones that say possibly out of business, which does cover the 4844. I've done actually quite a bit of research on those ones, and I have not been able to find that these businesses are still operating. I've tried searching all over on the internet, phoning, sending out letters. I've gotten letters returned saying the wrong address. So if it does say, I know it says possibly out of business on here, most likely is the reason on there. I can dig into it in just a second to see what that specific one is for 4844. The other one, the account number 54358, is from a local person that it was a fire department bill, didn't have insurance. I've exhausted everything that I can do here. I deem it pretty much hit a brick wall with this, where I can't do pretty much any more on collections on this. However, I still intend to be, I have been in discussions with some of the collection agencies in the province, and that specific one I still plan to, if council's okay with that, take that one to a collection agency once I get that policy set up. Anyone that is a personal thing that's not a company that went out of business, I do still intend on trying to collect. It'll just be through a third party in doing that.
Councilor Gregory?
So these ones that are possibly out of business or out of country and that, do they still have property here in the Ronge that we know of? Like, this is obviously property tax, right?
No.
No?
No, a couple of them were vendors for the Uniplex that I believe rented space for concessions.
Oh yeah,
And
that
that
BC outfit you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the specific names, but there's two of them that were specifically on that. They're not in business anymore. So through the other ones. And then the out of province or out of country one is landing fees for the airport. I believe that company is also out of business, but like I'm not able to find anything on there.
Yeah, I was gonna say let's put a lien against something, but if we don't have anything.
Yeah, I'm just gonna pull up that other one that Councilor Ruiz was.
There are a couple of accounts where we've had discussion just around the fact that we would be more on top of those accounts receivables, and where it's appropriate, where we have leverage to exercise it sooner. And then also to start the collections process in a more timely fashion, so they don't get to the 2-year portion. But
a lot of these are 4 years
this
back.
is and the write-offs would have the effect of essentially not misrepresenting receivables. And if we do still pursue it and we collect the money, that's great. But it just won't show on the books that we have an account receivable that you might rightfully expect to collect, where we're saying it's highly unlikely that you might collect.
So basically, this write-off is just for accounting purposes and not necessarily for the collection of those dues.
Right. So I just found out the other account number is 66300 there. That one is actually an airline out of Calgary. That again, that's another one that's out of business. I kind of hit the wall on that. There's really not much I can do to collect on businesses that are
out of business.
I'll move that council proceed to authorize the write-off of attached list of accounts with arrears.
I'll second.
Councilor Gregory, any questions?
No.
All in
That's
favor?
satisfactory.
Okay.
Aye.
Motion is carried. Okay. Building permit and development report. Information only, I guess. Motion to receive and file.
I'll move.
Okay, motion by Councilor Gregory.
I'll second.
Councilor Roux, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. Okay, we have 9.4 discretionary use permit for London Cooper's Day Home.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Okay, now we have unsigned municipal documents from the last 10 years.
Ooh.
Just a smattering of things
Just
that
to
we're
clean
trying
up,
to
I
clean
guess,
up, and when I have my office inspection, then
This
they
is,
won't be asking questions.
Good work, by the way. You must have done deep.
No, that's Allison, and that gets all the credit for that.
Nice.
Just administrative cleanup.
Correct.
Yeah,
And so you
motion
need
to approve the
Um,
signatures to
proceed. I move that council proceed with option A to authorize the mayor and CAO to execute those documents identified on the prepared list of unsigned minutes and documents.
I'll second.
okay, so Mr. Veteran seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Okay.
I'll also move.
Utility vehicle purchase, yeah.
I'll move that council proceed with option A to approve the purchase of a new utility vehicle with attachments for an upset value of $63,000 inclusive of taxes. And that's just, it's $3,000 above what's budgeted, right? That's
It's on budget, but the tax puts it
taxes,
over.
yeah, yeah, okay.
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Veteran.
Question?
Question?
What kind of machine is it?
It is a
Look, just to be clear, we'll be in the process of getting quotes. You're just approving an upset value, but we do have a quote from one company that is under that value. So, and that is from Kubota, I believe.
that's correct, yeah, it's a Kubota 2690 tractor that has different attachment capabilities. It's a blower, sweeper, or mower.
Is it useful for other things as well?
Yes, so I mean, forwarding into this year would benefit us with snow removal immediately. But we do need a new one for next year for Parks and Rec, for community services, for park maintenance. So it would be a shared piece of equipment.
Okay, call for the question. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion's carried. Okay, I guess that's it for the regular
Okay.
items.